All right,
And
recording's going. All right, now you can go, Craig.
so welcome everybody. If you need the multimedia viewer, that's down in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. So please click into that. Um, Find the Q&A function down in the very bottom right corner, and please put your questions in Q&A. It makes them a lot easier for us to navigate. And we'll save the chat if there's a link that we want to put up in there. So we've got the recording started. Welcome everyone to the 75th episode. Is that like our Diamond Jubilee?
It
Holy cow.
is. It is. I would have bought everybody diamonds if I had known.
Yeah, well, next time. But things have been going really great. This is a topic that's near and dear to me as a rifle shooter. And so I think we're going to have a really good conversation today. Upcoming shows are going to be Dress for the Outdoors with the BOW program, Grouse Hunting Basics, Preparing for Archery Success, and then we're going to do a little birding and talk about Hawk Ridge up by Duluth on the 28th. And then the next one is all about fishers. And there's a group of guys that work in research and wildlife that are going to come in and talk to us about that. So next slide, James.
Sure thing. And Craig, just to be clear, you're talking about the small furry mammal, not the people with fishing rods, right?
No, no, these are just perfect little predators that run around in the woods. They have a thick, luxurious fur, and they'll be able to tell us about how we can help, produce more of these critters with denning boxes and stuff. So it's going to be a neat talk.
Nice. All right. Um, I am. There we go. All right. Today's topic is bullet construction, understanding bullet construction, and Craig and I are going to be talking about that. We've got a couple of great guests with us from uh, Jon Zinnel and Eric Miller, and I'll let them introduce themselves in just a second. Before we get into this topic, though, there's a couple things I want to talk about. One, um, if you're interested in hunting, or if you're interested in learning to hunt, or you know somebody who's been interested in learning to hunt and they just haven't been able to figure it out, we still have spots available for our adult learn to hunt deer programming that's happening here in the metro course, our North Woods course up in Bemidji that started a couple of weekends
Saturday.
ago, a couple
Yep.
Saturday. Well,
Yeah.
a couple of
Last
days
Saturday.
ago. It feels like forever, but it's only been an eternity. A couple of days ago, it started in Bemidji. Our Metro class starts September 21st, so there's still spots available for that, and those are going to be two different hunts, one at St. Croix State Park and one at Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge.
Yep.
So we still got spots available for that. The other thing that I want to call attention to is, and I told Craig this morning, it's Huntsmas Eve. Tomorrow is September 1st. There are two different hunting seasons that start tomorrow. We've got mourning doves that start September 1st, and then our bear season starts September 1st. So, we're in the final countdown towards hunting. We got seasons coming throughout September and October and November. So it's a great time to be talking about hunting. It's a great time to be talking about bullets. For bullets specifically, if everything goes right, this is the one thing that touches the critter before you get up to it. So it's an important component. It's an important thing to consider, and I'm really happy to have Jon and Eric here. Jon and Eric, I'll go with Jon first. Jon, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having us. Looking forward to that. So, like James mentioned, Jon Zinnel with Federal Ammunition. So I manage all of our conservation program support with all the different state wildlife agencies as well as conservation organizations. And then I also do all of our youth shooting sports programs when it comes to supporting whether it's high school trap leagues or NRA or CMP or those types of programs. In regards to youth shooting sports. So kind of those two programs pushing forward with Federal Ammunition. So looking forward to the conversation here to talk about, bullet construction and different bullet options for different game, I guess. We could kind of go into those channels and I'll let Eric give his introduction and what he does for the company.
Perfect. Thanks, John. My name is Eric Miller. I'm the Rifle Product Manager for Federal, CCI, and Spear. So work through assortments, looking at calibers, bullets, kind of what we're going to load going forward, and really looking at what Federal is going to kind of go into the future and maintain what we're loading and working with right now. So looking forward to the discussion and going from there.
Awesome. Thank you both for being here. It's great to have your, insider knowledge on these topics. And, just to kind of set some ground rules, this conversation is really about how bullets are constructed, why different materials are used, what the different applications for them are. And so that's really what our focus today is going to be about, because it's gotten to a point where there's been this proliferation of technologies and materials that are used, and it can actually be a little overwhelming, especially when you're new to shooting, to sit there and go and you see all these different boxes, you see all these different terms that are out there. We're really trying to give people some ammunition to approach this stuff the right way and get what they need to do what they need to do. So with that, I will turn it over to Kraig for the next slide. And Kraig and I are going to swap off here from slide to slide, so you don't get too much of one person going on and on. So Kraig, take it away.
So the first thing that you got to kind of figure out is the anatomy of the cartridge. And this is a great slide that John sent over, and it really shows the 4 parts. You got the case, you got the primer, the powder, and the projectile. And those pieces have to all work together to make that cartridge work and fire. One of the things that we cover in youth firearm safety with all the kids, so they know the 4 major parts of a cartridge. But today we're going to be talking specifically about number 1. So go ahead and make our switch.
Sure. And it's really important, for new folks, a lot of people use bullets and cartridges interchangeably. And John and Eric, y'all know that that's not technically correct in any sense of the word, right? Like the bullet is a component of an overall cartridge.
Yep.
Yeah, we know
that's
when people are referring to it, but understanding the nomenclature and what you're actually, when you're talking about a bullet, that very specific piece to the cartridge, and like you had said earlier, it's the portion of the cartridge that touches the animal. So it is extremely important part of it, and what we talk about is the bullet.
Yep.
All right. So getting into bullets, the cartridge concept that really sort of originated, we're going to do a real quick rewind into history. Back in the day, they didn't have cartridges. They had powder, they had loose powder, they had loose bullets, they had loose primer caps, and the powder and the bullet would go down the barrel, and you'd shove it down with a ramrod. And if you want to know more about that, we've got a muzzleloader talk on our website that discusses that in detail. And then a primer cap would kind of go over a little, it's called a nipple. It goes on a piece of the firearm, and a hammer hits it, which causes a little flash, which ignites the powder and launches that bullet. Well, back in around 1845, a Frenchman decided, well, I'm just going to shove a bullet onto a primer cap and have a hammer hit it, and it'll generate enough force to launch it, but it's not going to go very far. It's not going to do very much. But boy, it's fun to shoot at plates in a parlor room, and it gained a lot of popularity. And so that's where the rimfire cartridge kind of originated. Now these are lead tip bullets that are cartridges that there's no separate primer component. It's a separate powder or compound that's in the bottom of the case, and then the regular smokeless powder goes on top of it, and that impact from the hammer ignites the primer compound, that ignites the smokeless powder, that launches the projectile. And this is kind of where that original first integrated metal mass-produced cartridge concept came from. John, Eric, y'all, is that if I'm saying anything wrong, please say, James, you're wrong. and it'll be entertaining for everybody else, and I'll learn something. So
Yeah, no, you're right on. And when it comes to there, you mentioned it, that the rim fire is exactly that, right? It's a rim fire, so there is no separate primer that is connected into the cartridge. Whereas the previous slide, you saw those four different pieces, of the actual cartridge, with the primer, the powder, the cartridge, and the bullet. This has that priming solution that's actually pressed down into the rim of to the cartridge, which obviously the term rim fire comes from. And your firing pin strikes that rim, which ignites that concoction with the powder and then pushes your projectile out. And so, certainly in the image that is there, looks like a 22 short, 22 long, kind of going left to right. Very common cartridges still today. A lot of folks, I'm sure, grew up and still, use a 22 long rifle or something similar when you're out, whether it's chasing squirrels or just target shooting and plinking, they say, when you're going through there. So very common cartridge today. We still are making and loading those right here in Anoka, Minnesota, and we load a bunch of them. So very, very spot on there, James.
awesome. All right, Kraig, take it away.
So there's a lot of bullets that are created for specific jobs. If you're a target shooter, there's a bullet that's designed specifically for shooting small holes in paper at close and long range distances. And by close, I mean 50 feet for the small bore shooters. And long range, I mean, I've heard of competition shooting out to 1,000 yards with the Wimbledon match. And each one of those bullets is going to have some unique qualities to make it do what you want it to do. If you're a predator hunter, you want a bullet that's going to harvest the animal cleanly, but not destroy the pelt that you're trying to get. If you're a big game hunter, and deer, bear, caribou, I think we can throw into that big game category. You want a bullet that's going to travel accurately to your target over reasonable distances and quickly and humanely harvest that animal. If you're going for large game, and we're going to throw big bears and moose and elk into that category, that bullet needs to hold together a little bit better. And thankfully, the manufacturers have come up with a way of making those bullets hold together longer to penetrate through that critter. So different materials for different things. I haven't had a chance to hunt truly dangerous game yet. My wife let me go to Africa, and she came along with, and we shot a bunch of plains game, which vary in size from, the very small up to the kudu or the eland, which are very big animals, and they take special bullets. You don't really want to use a bullet that was designed for a Minnesota whitetail on an eland. It's not going to perform the way you want it to. So the type of bullet is going to affect the trajectory. The higher the ballistic coefficient of that bullet, the way it cuts through the air. If you're shooting long range, you want a bullet that's very aerodynamic. And it also controls the rate of expansion. So if I'm out there deer hunting and I get a chance to harvest a deer or a bear at relatively close range, I want that bullet to hold together and penetrate and do its job. But if I'm antelope hunting and I'm going to shoot 400 yards, I want that bullet to perform at that distance as well. And I know Eric has probably spent countless hours going over bullet design. Eric, you got anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you touched on it, and there are a lot of choices that are out there, and every manufacturer tries to cover all of the aspects of what you or I may be hunting. And as a new shooter, it could be daunting, but when you break it down And, you know, you need to be shooting at a distance that you're comfortable with, that you practice at.
Mhm.
You know, if you are hunting big whitetails in Canada or any of, you know, northern, they can be bigger. You still bonded bullets that we'll get into, you know, your traditional cup and core bullets all have their very similar performance aspects. You're just going to kind of tailor it to what you're really going for, what caliber you're going to shoot, what distance you're comfortable shooting with. There's just a whole recipe of items that go into that, and just as you break it down and look at it, it really helps you kind of focus in and decide what bullet, what caliber, everything that you're kind of looking for to use for whatever you may be hunting, large game, whitetail, you know, across the gamut. So
Now,
Perfect.
now y'all just threw out a couple of terms there, and I want to make sure we hit them, because I don't want people getting confused. I'm going to blame my 12 years of Georgia public education. I confuse easily, so I want to make sure that that everybody's up to speed. So, Kraig mentioned bullet coefficient. Now that Eric, why don't you tell me what bullet coefficient is and what it means for a bullet?
So bullet coefficient is a calculation that is based on measurements of the bullet, and the higher the ballistic coefficient, or BC, the less drag that it has as it travels through. So in simple terms, high BC, the bullet, and there's other things that go into it, cuts through the air, and it really affects your long range trajectory, how much the bullet drops and carries out through distance.
Awesome. And so, you know, I use this analogy with Kraig this morning. You know, you look at a 30-30 bullet, a Winchester 30-30, which is a very distinctive shaped bullet, and that shape has a very specific reason, and that's because, you know, it's got that nice blunt, broad nose. It's not a pointy, um, very aerodynamic bullet, and that's because it sits in a tube magazine end to end with other cartridges. And if you had that really pointy tip, you'd run the risk of activating a primer with a recoil. So that kind of really broad, unaerodynamic bullet is kind of like launching a VW Beetle into the air versus a bullet that's very aerodynamic. You know, it's a Lamborghini. It's just going to cut right through, and it's not going to be affected as much by the medium that it's traveling through. Is that fair?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great explanation.
Awesome. Okay. Now the other thing that got said was this cup and core concept, and we've got a lot of different bullets here that have cross sections. We can see different colors. Really quickly, just Eric, can you tell us what those different colors might mean, and what is a cup and core sort of design?
Sure. So we talk about it, and if you think about it in a real simple form, it is a cup with the jacket, the brass or copper is the cup portion, which would be the outside, and then the lead is the core that goes inside of that. So it's just, you know, cup, and then the cup goes around the lead core. And then the way that attaches to, when we say that we're talking about a bonded bullet, that lead is bonded to that jacket, so that when it penetrates and expands, the lead stays with the jacket. And if that bullet weighs 180 grains coming out of your gun, if you were able to recover it on a bonded bullet, it would be fairly close, or we want it to be fairly close to 180 grains if you were able to recover it. So we don't lose any of the bullet, which really goes into the effect of the transfer of energy into the game animal. There is nothing wrong with cup and core bullet. They're power shock, non-typical, ELDX, you know, those are all cup and core bullets, you know, very accurate. There's just some differences. We may not have as much weight retention, energy transfer. And again, it goes back to what you're shooting, how far you're shooting, what you're comfortable with. You know, it's core lock, power shock, non-typical for us when the companies that we work with. That's our cup and core bullets.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to kind of drill down a little bit into that and talk about some of those different construction configurations. So, you know, that cup and core principle, the bonded bullets, we're going to unpack that a little bit. First, we're going to start off with something that doesn't really expand or isn't designed to expand nearly as much. And again, all of the different varieties that are out there, all of the different configurations that are out there, they're designed with specific applications in mind. And so, you know, the folks, you know, Eric thinks about this stuff 24/7, and it's all because there's a variety of different applications to do this stuff, and it's his and John's job to come up with the best solutions to these things. So one application are these, you hear it a lot, full metal jacket bullets. These are, you know, when they talk about the jacket, it's that outside case material that surrounds the core of the bullet that we were just talking about. When we talk about that cup and core principle, you know, you have material like a softer material like lead that expands readily. It's very malleable. It's got a great density to it. There's a lot of reasons why bullets are made out of lead. It's got, you know, a low melting point to work with. We've been using it for hundreds of years. But these full metal jackets, they have a complete shell. It's like an M&M almost, where you've got a metal shell around that core bullet construction, and it's designed specifically not to expand. And there are reasons for that. You know, varmint shooting, like Kraig mentioned earlier, you know, you want a small hole that's not going to ruin a pelt that you're trying to get to market. They're great for target shooting. That full metal jacket, that full covering, you know, when you shoot a bullet down a rifled barrel, you have metal on metal contact, and that can lead to small particles coming off in the barrel. And over time, especially if you're shooting a lot, that can affect the accuracy of the firearm moving forward. So you got to clean it, you got to scrub it, you got to make sure that the barrel is clear. So that full metal jacket really helps prevent material from building up. So it's great for target shooting. They load really smoothly and easily. So for semi-automatic platforms, they're really great for that, because I've got an old nylon 7722 semi-auto, and every once in a while a lead nose 22 shell will catch, and it'll interrupt the feed of that semi-auto. It doesn't happen often, but it happens every once in a while, and those full metal jackets, they'll slide over that. They won't get grabbed onto like lead will, because it's a softer metal. So that's why full metal jackets are out there. There's also an animal that's out there, or an entity that's out there, the total metal jacket, so you can see this full metal jacket with that cross section. It's almost entirely covered, but the bottom is typically open. A total metal jacket usually has that case going all the way around, and that's really helpful in indoor shooting situations, and that can be really beneficial in those sorts of environments. Eric or John, do y'all have anything to add on that?
Yeah, maybe not necessarily to add on that, but I think, you know, I mentioned before, but as we're going through this and diving into each one of these a little bit more in depth, you know, you mentioned everything has its application, right? So as we're going through there, we're going to try to define, you know, some of the applications that would be the best suit for the particular bullets that we're discussing. And so, but there is a lot of crossover too. So certainly, you know, the full metal jackets are a lot of folks, or you see on packaging FMJ for full metal jacket. You'll see that on a lot of the box ends. And as you're going into the retail store or even online and looking for the particular bullet that you're looking to use for your application, whether it be for target shooting or hunting or anything like that, you know, to be able to learn and to understand the terminology, and hopefully we can help you through that in this presentation. But most all of the packaging nowadays, we just went through a big redo of our packaging, and we're trying to make sure that everybody understands exactly what it is that each thing is used for. So understanding what those bullets can do and what the application would be, whether it's for big game, medium game, small game, varmints, target shooting, that kind of stuff. But also know that there is some crossover there, and certainly a lot of great places to go and look and learn about the various options of what it is. So, not a comment necessarily for the slide, but kind of as the whole presentation moves on, just to know that, just because the box has a deer on it doesn't mean that's the only thing that you can use to go and chase off. But it's a good reference to say, okay, white-tailed deer, what's common along the same size of that? And when you look at the whitetail species in general, there's certainly, you mentioned before, you grew up in Georgia, there's certainly a big difference between a Georgia whitetail deer and a northern Minnesota whitetail deer. Size-wise, it's probably a 2-for-1, maybe even a 3-for-1 in some cases, of the size difference. And so for that, you may look to use a different type of bullet if you're going to be hunting, in the south area, southern part of the country, for species that are a little bit smaller and lighter animals versus some of those larger. So we hopefully can answer those. And if anybody has any questions, certainly punch them into the Q&A as we keep working through here. We'll hit on them either in the presentation or at the end. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And especially some of those island deer in Georgia, they're basically house cat sized for all intents and purposes. Kraig, you want to do this next one?
Sure. So soft point bullets, the cup and core bullets that Eric had talked about, they're designed to expand on impact, and the thickness of the jacket, from the very tip of the bullet all the way to the base, changes in thickness to control that rate of expansion. And some of the companies out there will put a different color tip on that particular cartridge to signify that it might be a visual cue that it's 25, 26, 27, 30 caliber, by just the color of the nose of that bullet. But they aid in expanding, and that pushes that plastic core or cap back in there and starts the expansion process. And the bullet speed and what it encounters on the way through is what makes that bullet roll open. By increasing the diameter of the bullet through expansion, it's going to create a larger wound channel in that animal, and you're going to bring it to bag sooner. That's how we hunt deer with a firearm, is the shock value and the hemorrhage value. So they're leaking fluids out and disrupting the nervous system as that bullet goes through. And that's what they're designed to do, and they do it pretty well. Eric, you got anything you'd like to add about those bullets, soft points?
No, you covered it. Yeah, it's about, the ethical dispatch of the animal, and the bullet is doing that. You want the energy of that bullet to transfer into the animal. The tip helps a little bit when you're feeding sometimes. If you have a soft point bullet, that lead will deform a little bit. Not enough to really dramatically affect it unless you were speaking about really long range, but the tips, they don't melt, they stay. You can sometimes recover them when we shoot into gel. You can recover them, but that tip pushes back in and starts the expansion process.
I remember as a kid looking at my dad's 30-30 bullets, and there was a few of them in there that the round nose had been flattened off from years of being stuffed in the tube. They still work, but that pushing on the rear of the next case tended to flatten them out a little bit. So
yeah.
Okay, James, we'll let you roll the slide.
All right. So we've talked. we're kind of going further into this notion of expansion and with these bonded bullets. So this this is still building on this cup and core sort of principle, but it's taken it a next step. It's not just a shell of a casing and the lead is inside of it. It's, there's more thought about it. The case design is more thought out. There's more thought into the configuration of it, and all of that is to try to mitigate these trade-offs between retaining that weight as the bullet travels and the expansion of that bullet, because that case material doesn't expand nearly as well as the core of the bullet does. So these bonded core bullets, it's really, you have different configurations, you have different materials, all to try to strike that balance for the specific application that we've been talking about. And so you can see in this slide, you've got two different kinds of bonded core bullets. The bullet on the left is a very, there's a lot of case material there. There's a smaller core, and you can see, compared to the bullet on the right, it doesn't expand quite as much. You see it sitting taller and bigger compared to that bullet on the right that has a thinner case. There's more core material, so you're going to get more of that expansion of that bullet. And so Eric and John, when y'all are talking about applications and you're thinking about how this stuff is done, what is some of the calculus that y'all are doing to try to figure out that, because there's no silver bullet for this, right? That's the second ammunition pun I'm going to use, and at some point I'll stop, but not yet. What are some of the things that y'all are considering as you're putting this stuff together? Because those are intentional choices that y'all are making, right? Like, it's not just somebody's like, oh well, we've got extra case material, we'll just make this core a little smaller.
Yeah, it goes in, we look at it, the bullet on the left, if you look back, it would only essentially go back to that, the rest of the base is solid. So it's only going to peel back essentially to that point. And I feel like we're repeating, but it is worth repeating that we're talking about, you want the bullet to maintain its weight, its energy transfer. They both do it. They just do it in a little different aspect. So the other part of this that we talk about when you're shooting a rifle, selecting bullets, cartridges, some rifles will shoot better with a certain bullet, a certain setup. The best thing is to find the combination that shoots the best in your rifle, that you're accurate with, that is holding together, doing the things that you want to do on the game that you're after. And when you have confidence in the rifle, the rest of it should just be essentially muscle memory. After that, you shouldn't have to necessarily, we think about it, but so you just want good, solid, robust bullet, holds together, the distances that you're comfortable shooting with, and then again, I want all that energy to end up in the animal that I'm shooting.
That's a really great point, and we talk about that in our Learn to Hunt classes, where the more you practice with this, you don't want to be thinking about what's my bullet, what's my gun going to do on the stand. You want to be thinking about, you want to be focusing on the shot, you want to be focusing on that animal, you want to be focusing on the environment around you so that you're making a safe, ethical, and responsible shot. And so getting to the range, practicing, getting that layer of thought process that you don't have to make in the field is a huge step in all of this.
Yeah, one thing I might add for the bonded bullets here is a great, it's really preference, right? So you got to have that preference, but your gun has a preference too. I think Eric alluded to that, as far as some firearms will shoot, a certain bullet a little bit better than another. But one thing that's great about this bonded bullet and that the technology that's used to put those metals together is that you get really good weight retention. I mean, you can see in those upsets there next to the cutaways, very, very good weight retention, oftentimes in the high 90% range. So if you're shooting a 180 grain bullet, you're going to be, very close to that 180 grains left over if you're able to recover your upset in the animal. But that is going to then drop all of that energy inside of the critter that you're chasing. And so that is a very important part of that energy to be able to make sure that it's an ethical harvest. I think anybody that's heading a field, that's the number one thing in their mind, right? Is to one, have a good time, two, be safe, and three, make sure that you have and you're able to harvest ethically and morally for that animal, because the last thing you want to do is have an issue where something's not going to perform, or you're using something that is maybe better suited as a target bullet, but this offers a great weight retention option to be able to use that and drop your animal successfully.
Agree.
Nice. Kraig, you want to talk about non-lead bullets?
So non-lead bullets are essentially that. They're made from a solid copper or gliding type metal. Monolithic is a word that you hear. But they still mushroom very reliably, and they shoot extremely straight. Typical retains most of its energy. I mean, none of the weight, none of the material is going to be lost during the shooting process. So it's just a really good choice if that's the direction that your hunting is going to take you. And I've loaded quite a bit of these over the years and shot them, and they just shoot nice and true. And you can see the center there shows the bullets at different velocities. So over the range of that they were shot at, closer range, they're going to mushroom more. And at the furthest range, they're going to mushroom a little bit less, but they still mushroom. And I would say that last bullet, Eric, would you say twice the original diameter, even at its furthest distance? So it's going to put a bigger hole.
1.5, 1.25, it's hard to tell, but yeah, that would be close. And you can look at the petals that are back as it peels, that tip, and some of them have tips, some of them don't. But they essentially peel back those 4 petals or 6 petals, depending on how many, we call them skives, but that are put in the top of the bullet, and that essentially aids in the expansion, and it'll peel back to that set point.
Yep. So it's an option if that's what you choose to use. Some hunts may require it. Other places do not. And if you want to hunt some of those special hunts, you may have to make that choice. So
there is a very germane question in the Q&A for the slide, and so usually we kind of wait till the end to get to the Q&A. But somebody noticed the difference of those different openings, and so the question is, does that translate into more penetration and less transfer of energy? Eric, do you?
It depends. It's a little, the engineers get into it and they look at what performs the best. If you were shooting through a consistent medium and didn't have to contend with bone, and there's different density in bone, hide, blood, things like that, that all impacts it. So I would be really hard to say that it equates into more or less. The bullet is designed, the engineers have designed all of them to expand reliably over a broad range of different, I'm going to say media, but different aspects of what you're shooting through. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but they will expand reliably, and I wouldn't say that it is less penetration when you're talking about a hunting bullet, whether it's 4 or 6, or it's just the way the bullet is designed. We design them to perform across as much items as we think that we can account for.
Nice. All right, so we've talked about some different construction materials. We've talked about some different construction techniques, and this is just kind of showing, those differences translate to different behaviors of the bullet. And so we talked about weight retention. We've talked about those cup and core. The lead is a softer metal. It can foul your rifling if you're shooting a lot of it. You can lose it as it travels. through a medium. And so these are just X-rayed blocks of ballistic gel. And so you can see in that top picture, that's a lead bullet. It's probably a very, I don't want to use the word simple because these aren't simple processes, but it's a very standard cup and core sort of bullet that has a lot of expansion capabilities. As it's expanding, going through a medium, it's going to be losing some of its material. So this is not one of those. This is probably not one of those more advanced bonded bullets that have a lot of technology or new materials in them. So this is kind of comparing two very different ends of the spectrum. You have a bullet that has a bunch of expansion and can shed material, and then you have a bullet that has a lot of weight retention but not as much expansion, and they behave differently. So this is just to demonstrate that those materials behave differently as they're traveling and they move through things. So that's why this stuff is important, because again, we're balancing the trade-offs of what we're trying to achieve and the tools that are out there. There's a reason why when you buy a socket wrench set, there's 20 different sockets, right? Because there's not one bolt head that's out there that needs to be fixed. You've got different tools for different applications. So just a visualization of what that looks like for two very different styles of bullets.
Nice job. Okay. So different bullets for different applications. I probably spend 10 times target shooting to actual shooting of game. I enjoy going out to my range, whether I'm just shooting paper targets or plinking. There's something about shooting old bowling pins and seeing them pop off the little table that's kind of reassuring. But I shoot a lot of just regular everyday bullets. They might be cup and core, they might be full metal jacket, they might be just 22 bullets. And if you jump over to the small game category, weight retention and expansion, if you're shooting snowshoes or cottontails, I've found that some of the hollow points, they do stop the critter quicker, but body shots aren't normally what you're looking for. You're looking for a precisely placed headshot, and any one of those 22 short, long rifle would probably be an adequate rabbit or squirrel load. And you could go and spend hours shooting. I can't tell you how many thousands of rounds of 22 shells that I've shot over my shooting career. And you learn something with every trip to the range. And I was just telling James that I picked up a target barreled 22 rifle, single shot, probably weighs 12 pounds, but it's just a nice gun to go out and practice your trigger squeeze and practice, your shot placement on your target. Is it doing what I want it to do? When I go hunting big game, I want a bullet that's going to carry as much weight through the animal. And there's a couple of ones I've used, the partitions, I've used bonded bullets, I've used some of the solid copper rounds. And the neat thing about the copper round is that I've found you can step down in size a little bit. If you're normally shooting a 180, I can shoot a 165 and still get the same performance out of that because the bullet holds the weight longer. And Eric, what do you think about that? Is that a fair statement that you can step down a size?
Yeah, you can. That is a fair statement, and it's a choice. A lot of all copper, like our trophy copper or anybody's copper bullet, they're inherently accurate. They're very consistent, and that whole weight retention. And when you start talking about grain weights in a very specific caliber, you can really go down the rabbit hole between 180 grain, 165 grain. You
150.
can Ford and Chevy. I mean, you can really get into the weeds. And I guess I would go back to, you know, finding a bullet. You're looking at your caliber, a good bullet that shoots in your rifle, and kind of looking at where you're going. If you're going on a hunt of a lifetime, you know, the ammo is probably the cheapest part of your hunt, but maybe one of the most important. You know, we could get into the optics conversation, but you know, it's you want a good bullet, and then just finding. John and I talked about it yesterday. Having confidence in your rifle. You know, if it shoots, that it's not the rifle. It would be you or I that gets the shakes or you know, buck fever.
Yep.
You know, take all that out of it and make sure that they kind of match up, and you're comfortable with the recoil. You're comfortable with how far you can shoot. All of that goes into it. And it's really preference on if you want to shoot all copper, what bullet or cartridge shoots best in your rifle, and take all that into consideration when you're looking at the myriad of choices that are out there for what you're going for.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you've got to try a number of different bullet choices to find what that gun's going to like, because one gun may really love a certain bullet weight, and you try that same bullet weight and the same caliber, and that gun says, no way. I'm not going to print pretty little clover leaves. I'm going to shoot softball, baseball size groups. And so you want it to shoot as accurately as you can, and all the other stuff that we talked about. But try a bunch of different ones, because it's going to give you that confidence that if I point my gun at this critter, the chances are I'm going to get it. And so that's what I think about different bullets and different applications. So James, if you want to take the next slide.
Yeah, I do want to just hone in on one little thing. Eric, can you talk? So we've got, you know, this slide, we've got the bullets that are on the left. You know, we've got that full metal jacket that's totally surrounded except for the bottom, and then you've got the other bullet that's more of a standard cup and core with that, so it's going to expand a lot. You can really see the difference in the case thickness and the case design around that core. So Eric, my question to you is, what is a partitioned bullet, and why would you use it?
Okay, so a partition, if you look to the ones to the right, that first image, without getting, I'd say that's a Mauser partition. I'm just taking a guess. But it's literally what it says. It's a partition in the bullet. So the copper that goes across the middle of that, right underneath where it says monolithic, to that picture, that is the partition of the bullet. So it would basically, the lead and the jacket would essentially go back to that point, but yet they were able to put lead in the back of the bullet that aids in weight to get where we want our bullet to weigh. And it just helps with, again, we're talking about energy, but it's going to expand, have great expansion right up into that partition. And then the rest of it is aided in energy transfer because of the weight of the bullet at the back.
Excellent. Awesome. Oops. All right. That's the end of our slideshow. We do have some questions, and we've got about 10 minutes left for a little bit of discussion, and I hope we can get that done. I'm gonna, if anybody out there has any questions about this stuff, if you want to follow up with us, Craig's contact is on here. My contact is on here. Again, this is being recorded. If you want to come back and review some stuff, please feel free. Please reach out to us. We're always happy to talk about this stuff. You can, I mean, Craig's just been sitting there this whole time with a smile on his face because we're talking bullets. So, you know, this is a topic he enjoys. I mean, he's just glowing. I'm gonna end our slideshow and All right.
In the practice session, Eric and I talked about, you know, when you see your favorite load out there, buy a box or two or five. Um, don't wait until the night before hunting season to go out and say, oh, I want to buy a box of bullets, because everybody else is out there shopping at the same time. Check your local stores, check your internet providers. And I actually survived the pandemic with a couple extra boxes on my shelf, because I thought, I don't want them all to disappear. But
Yeah,
Craig, that's a great comment. And one thing that I'll kind of add on to that is the previous discussion of really wanting to make sure that you're comfortable with your firearm and that you're able to make a good shot. And with that, just like anything, whether right now obviously we're talking about rifles, but it's the same thing that goes for shotguns, for bird hunting and wing hunting. As well as anybody that's in the archery world, is that practice. That is a huge thing. It's one of those where I would imagine that you know some folks that grab their hunting rifle, go down to their local range for the deer sight in, and shoot their 3 rounds and feel like they're pretty well on and they can go and do that. There's
close
literally
enough.
Yes, that I tell this to all the different, youth programs and people that I work with on the competitive side of things is it's really practice, practice, practice. And one of those, you talk, I think there's some questions in here regarding affordability and the cost and the challenges that way. And Eric alluded to the comment earlier talking about it may be one, it's a very small part of the equation when it comes to your overall hunt, as far as the dollars go, when you start talking boots and pants and jackets and clothes. And if you're traveling to and from with gas and hotels and all those different things that go into a trip, this ammunition part is a pretty small piece to that puzzle. But I tell folks, and the same thing with competitive shooting, is if you can practice more, by all means, the more practice you have, that time is never going to be wasted, because you're going to learn so much about your capabilities as a marksman, and that's going to equate into the field as a higher level of success or higher ability of success to go and do that. And so I tell folks, when they're worried about missing a pheasant or missing a grouse, the number one thing is, I say, if you're worried and you want to buy the best of the best, right? And there's a lot of loads that are really high priced, and then there's a lot of those that are going to be able to do the job, maybe be a little more budget friendly. I say, find something middle of the road and then spend that extra money. And if you have that extra finance, to go buy rounds to practice with, go buy target rounds, go buy some of those others, just to get more time behind the trigger so that you can be more successful in the field. And I think there's, that's a big part of this, and to try different things too when it comes to those different bullets. There's lots of options out there, with the cup and core, with the tipped bullets, with the bonded bullets, and all the way through. Every firearm's going to be a little bit different, right? And you can even dabble into the weight difference of whether you're shooting a 180 grain versus a 200 grain and so forth. All those different options is just to practice for that. And I don't want to jump in, James, to answer the questions, but there's one I think that can tie in with my comments here of the compare the different bullet styles and also the cost and affordability. And I kind of alluded to that previously, but there are a lot of those bullets that are in the, in more of a quote unquote budget friendly section that are still a very high level premium bullet. And so there's definitely options out there to be able to find the bullet that's going to shoot very well as a premium performer, but more of a budget friendly option. So you can look at things like our Federal Fusion, right? That's really a premium bullet that is really at a very good budget-friendly level for those folks to go out and to hunt medium to large game with. And that can transfer over from all different styles. You saw the one slide where we had a good 20 or 30 different options that are there. Each one of those is a different bullet type, right? And they're going to price difference from the low to the high, and certainly lots in between. So there will be lots of options out there. And again, we as manufacturers are trying to do what we can to make your choices a little bit easier and less confusing when you go to the retail environment, right? So we're trying to make sure we have the right information on the packaging so that you folks can look into it and answer those questions when you're going through and looking at your options, whether you're gauging that financially or gauging that with performance or trying to find that middle spot that's going to be able to find the right round for you.
Nice. I mistakenly answered a question, so I want to make sure we get to it so that I'm not a liar in the chat or the Q&A, sorry. But the question is looking at southern deer hunting or deer hunting in the southern zone. And the question is, would a monolithic bullet shot from a rifle cartridge handgun provide less expansion and energy transfer? Does Federal or another ammo maker make a monolithic bullet rifle cartridge for short-barreled firearms?
Yeah, so whether it's a TC Encore, there are other options, but if that's what kind of we're looking at, it does not provide less expansion. The bullet might be slower shot out of a shorter barrel, but again, I'm going to go back. The engineers have designed it that it will operate across a wide range of velocity, so you would still get expansion, still get energy transfer. And the other answer to his question is most, if not all, manufacturers to some degree would offer a monolithic or a copper bullet in all of the calibers that he has listed. So you might have to look around a little bit, but they're out there. It's an option for every one of those calibers that he's got and more that, as the huge number of calibers are out there, most of them have some sort of option depending on the manufacturer in a copper round.
Nice.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Eric, too, I was just looking here while we were going. We have a Power Shock copper for our 300 blackout. We have a trophy copper for the 223 options, and so there certainly is options for those various calibers that he was discussing in the question. So
nice. Really quick, while we're on the lead-free topic, there's a question in here about lead-free rounds for shotgun zone, and this whole conversation's been about rifle bullets, but there's a good chunk of Minnesota that they're restricted to shotgun hunting for deer. So could y'all touch on that just a little bit?
Yeah, so we have two different slug options. When it comes down to it, we have a true ball rifled slug, which is a lead slug option. So that's going to be utilized for those smooth bore barrels as you're going through, because it is a rifled slug. And then we have a trophy copper sabot that's available for 12 and 20 gauge as options that are out there. And so we certainly do have both. It just depends on the application. The sabot, is most likely going to be utilized in a rifled barrel and so forth option for that southern zone and southern slug areas to go through and do that. So there are options available in both 12s and 20s.
Nice.
I want to thank Jon for clarifying sabot, not sable, not sabot. Nice job. We all learned a new word today.
Let me see. Here's the $1 million question. Where are good places to find ammo? And we get that. We've gotten that on talks before. And Kraig and I's glib answer is anywhere you can. But I think why don't you guys, Jon? You've told me before. What is the manufacturing layout up there in Anoka like? How much are y'all cranking out?
Yeah, so I'll go through with a kind of a blanket answer and then follow up on the end with where to possibly go and look. And so Eric and I both we're probably sitting 15 yards apart from each other in two different offices, but we're connected to our ammunition facility here in Anoka, Minnesota. For those of you that aren't aware, we are a very large ammunition manufacturer located here in your home state of Minnesota. And so we're excited about that. We've been here for 100 years. We just celebrated that anniversary of manufacturing ammunition at our facility. And we're cranking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week here at the factory, 3 shifts a day. We are building more ammunition than we ever have in the history of our company. And so we continue to do that. We have over 1,600 very passionate employees that are out there to make and to keep all of our machines rolling for all of our customers. And so So we certainly are building more. It's just a matter of time when you start to look at, the current level of hunters and shooters, and then you add somewhere in the ballpark of 10 to 15 million new first-time gun owners. And you add into that, and Eric and I were talking earlier this week of, even if you figure one box or even two box of ammunition for those folks, whether they're going to the range or going out hunting, even at a low end, right, of 10 million new gun owners, that's a lot of ammunition that, manufacturers, whether it's us or others across the country or imports coming in, that we're having to be able to manufacture for, right? And so we're building at the highest capacity that we have, and we'll continue to do so to make sure our customers have the ammunition that they need. And so going into kind of more specifics into their question of where to find them, right? So certainly, depending on where you are located, north or south, in Minnesota, there's lots of various options. There's quote unquote big box stores where, those are those main retailers that you're accustomed to going and shopping and being able to walk in there with nothing and come out with far more than you probably need, which is always fun. And I know my wife appreciates those trips often. And so though they're more and more, as I've traveled, not only in Minnesota, but other states, a lot of those areas and even the smaller shops are starting to get a lot more ammunition. I work with a lot of shooting teams across the country, and I get texts and emails every day that show, thank goodness we're starting to get some more inventory, some more stock that is hanging out on the shelves. So certainly try to look at those local retailers that you have, whether it's a mom and pop sporting goods store. In some of the areas, even gas stations will carry that. But then there's a lot of options. I think Kraig alluded to earlier is, there's a lot of online retailers that are also up there. So there's, of course, the Cabela's and Bass Pros, and there's the Midway USAs and those folks that are very large retailers that sell and hold ammunition for purchase. And as well as we do sell direct off our website. So when you go to our website, you can see different options. If you're there to just research what's available, what maybe is going to fit your application better, we do sell direct, and we'll ship direct to customers. So we're kind of in that game as well to look at some of those things. A lot of those, maybe more specific calibers that you don't find in some of those smaller shops that they don't hold or handle. We might be able to find that on our website as well. And so certainly as you're going through that time to practice and to get out and hit the range before the seasons, you want to make sure that you have what you need before the season opener, which for some folks will be tomorrow. So that's pretty exciting news for those folks that have a bear tag.
Right. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate y'all taking the time. It is just after 1 o'clock. Thanks everybody who tuned in. I really appreciate it. Like I said, this is being recorded. We'll have it up on our website sometime next week. If there were a couple of questions that we couldn't quite get to, but hopefully we provided some insight and some information for folks. And again, looking at, when you go to the stores and when you look at all the availability of options that are out there, hopefully this conversation helped inform the audience as to why there's so much variability, both in terms of price as well as application for those uses. So I really appreciate Jon and Eric, y'all spending the time sharing your knowledge and the resources that you've made available to us. So thanks so much for y'all being on. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking about dressing for the outdoors. Clothing. So hunt season starts tomorrow, and so there's going to be a lot more hunt talks coming up. So thanks everybody, and we will see y'all next week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.